recording.
Do we have people? How many people are here? Oh, 32. I see. Okay. Sorry, I'll turn myself off.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, Joe, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Hello, welcome. Yeah, thanks, Diana. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our second community event. This is the Hope, Healing, and Recovery Exchange for frontline workers, healthcare workers across the many sectors. And, you know, this theme, we need to heal too. And so here we are in the midst of our fourth wave, and good timing for us to connect. And I want to welcome everyone who's joining us for the first time, and also people who joined the last time. And this, I know that's such a charged word, hero, but that little device that we're familiar with to kind of keep our masks in place, you know that was created by patients. That was created by patients in our forensic mental health psychiatry program, and they truly consider that word sincerely. And so I wanted to just share that. Now, so here we are at this event today. I wanted to, first of all, introduce myself. My name is Joe Palazzari, and I'm a psychologist here at St. Joe's Hamilton. And I've been part of staff support initiatives, both on the front lines, on-site supports, and also with our regional portal for healthcare worker supports. And we'll post a link to that as we go along in our session. Today's event is also being co-hosted by Diana Takas from Hamilton Health Sciences Center. Diana, do you want to give a wave? Justin, are you able to forward the slide?
Should I jump in, Joe, just with a few words?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today and to be doing this alongside Joe. So I'm the Resilience Integration Specialist at Hamilton Health Sciences, which is a position that supports staff, team, leadership, physician resilience, and is really also looking at supporting organizational resilience. So really excited to be part of this and talking more about topics that are very near and dear to my heart.
Thanks, Diana. And so just a mention about the format today. So we're going to use the same format as we did the last time. So we're looking, Justin, if you could just advance the slide. Thank you. So we're in this Zoom webinar format. We're going to have some engagement exercises that you'll see coming up. And Diana's also going to present some material. And we have some special guests and panelists joining us today who will share their stories of how they've been coping and living through the pandemic. I wanted to let you know that the chat box will be enabled as needed. You'll see there will be a part in the session to engage you that way. But generally speaking, you'll all be muted during the presentation, and this is being recorded. Next slide, Justin. I'll throw it over to Diana to do the land acknowledgement.
Thanks, Joe, and I'm glad to have the privilege to do this. So I want to begin by acknowledging the lands on which we work, live, and play as the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, who have lovingly tended to these lands for thousands of years. I, as many of you, are settlers here, and I want to take a moment to thank them for this careful tending. It is also my intention to encourage all of us to learn from Indigenous teachings and from our collective history of the harms of colonization. It is my sincerest wish that we make a collective commitment to reconciliation. As most of you know, this Thursday marks the first national recognition of Orange Shirt Day, which gives us all an opportunity to publicly acknowledge our commitment to reconciliation by wearing an orange t-shirt and learning more about the devastating impacts of residential schools. So please take a look on Thursday into the many, many events that are being held as a way to deepen your learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana, for that. Next slide, Justin. Thank you. And we have some people behind the scenes helping us, so thank you to them. You'll hear me refer to Justin. Thanks for your support behind the scenes. So let's just kind of review why we're here. And so the goals of today's exchange around hope and healing. We want to honor the diverse experiences of health and community care workers in our community throughout the pandemic and to promote collective reflection, mutual support, and recovery. We want to hear personal stories of overcoming challenges and building resilience from others on the front line of the pandemic. And lastly, we want to continue to increase awareness of resources available to everyone around these important topics. Next slide. And so we do have two panelists with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Cassie Fisher, you'll see her bio here. She shares with us some of her interests and sharing belly laughs with friends and family. She's a Tiger Cat fan. And in her role, she's a psychotherapist. She's been doing this for over a decade, with the majority of her work focused on supporting folks around their trauma experiences. Cassie currently works as a mental health counselor with the Hamilton Family Health Team in a primary care setting and in a shelter setting, trying to figure out ways to offer more accessible and equitable counseling supports to the Hamilton community. So thank you, Cassie Fisher, for joining us. The other panelist today is Dr. Lindsay George. She is a psychiatrist with the Hamilton Family Health Team and an associate professor with the McMaster Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences. So today's focus perhaps on the sector of primary care. Thanks for that wave, Lindsay, and for joining us today along with Cassie. And next slide, please. Before we kick things off, I just wanted to acknowledge the support of all of our partners, and you'll see all these sectors represented today, from the hospitals, the university, the family medicine department, as well as some of the community agencies, first responders, Canadian Mental Health Association, at the Aboriginal Health Center, the City of Hamilton, and Shoppers Drug Mart, and also the Thrive Group. So thank you for your support and sponsorship of these community events. To kick things off, we're going to start with an engagement exercise. So Justin will show us how to do this. So just like last time, I would ask that everyone try this out. We had some success last time, so I'm hoping it'll work again. But if you visit this website, slido.com, I'm going to just go there myself and enter the code 740583. And you'll be greeted with a question. Next slide. And so the question here is, describe how you are feeling as we move through the fourth wave of the pandemic. So if everyone can go to that website, you'll see the question at the site and just enter a word or two to describe how you're feeling during this fourth wave. And I'll give people 30 seconds or a minute to do that.
Joe, could you read the code out again? I don't have it in front of me. Some
Yeah,
people
sure
didn't get it.
can. The Slido.com code 740583. I'll just repeat that again, 740583. Excellent, excellent. So thank you everyone for participating in this question, and some very honest responses here. Exhaustion, frustration. I hear that expression often. I'm done. I hear that a lot. People losing stamina, discouragement, feeling overwhelmed, resigned, ongoing uncertainty. People are tired, hey? Cautiously optimistic. So there's a tone of some optimism. I think it's just kind of an ongoing reflection of, it's kind of like, so there's some bruising here. It's been something to kind of have to experience yet another wave here. Any reflections, Diana?
Well, I think yet another wave that is just so different from all the other waves, right? And I know for myself, reflecting on each of the waves and every one, I thought, oh, it can't get any worse than it is now, and then it does. So, yeah, I fully feel the sentiments being described here. I think, and many of us are beyond done. It's been a long haul.
Yeah, we hear you. All right, thank you everyone for participating in our first engagement exercise. Moving along, I think I'll now flip it over to Diana, who will offer some content around resilience and some reflections on how we can maintain our well-being. Thanks, Diana.
You're welcome, Joe. I really want to take the next 10 to 15 minutes to just really help us reflect on resilience. And I'm hoping that we're going to really start to consider an expanded definition of resilience. So please join me as I walk you through this little journey, and we go on it together. So I often start presentations with this quote. So the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be affected by it is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water without getting wet. These are the beautiful words of Dr. Naomi Remen, who is a palliative physician and wrote this book called Kitchen Table Wisdom. And I just share it here because I want to acknowledge that we are human beings first. We are human beings who work in the service of other human beings who are suffering. And that just can't help but impact us. It can impact us positively, but we can also be challenged by it. Slide. So this Venn diagram is a way that I like to illustrate the various risks that we are exposed to in healthcare. And the Venn diagram, of course, has all these overlapping circles because these terms share similarities, but they also have distinct differences. And any one of us can experience one, some, or all of these terms over the course of the day, over the course of the week, and certainly over the course of our careers. And I would say that the ones on the right side of the Venn diagram tend to be a little bit more individually based and focused, and the ones on the left side are a little bit more systemically based and focused. Now, it's beyond the scope of our presentation today for me to do a deeper dive into describing each and every one of these terms. But if you're interested in more information, please feel free to visit the Hamilton Health Sciences Resilience Support Toolkit, and the link will be at the end of our conversation today. There will be a slide that has the link to that, that page, that website page. So what I want to say here, just as an overall message, is that we are not new to these risks in healthcare. They have been increasingly challenging us personally and systemically for many years. The pandemic has only served to exacerbate all of these risks and also has exposed further cracks in our system. And so, so a good example would be around this would be our individual and collective experience of the increasing impacts of burnout. And judging from the words that you all put on the word cloud, I think it's something that's very relatable. What I find, however, is that we often tend to focus solely on the term burnout as a systemic issue. And in some respects, I think that's at the expense of the other terms, because we also simultaneously are being exposed to issues of moral distress, numerous impacts of traumatic loss, and the ongoing wear and tear of empathic strain. And so I really believe that a continuous acknowledgement and tending to all of these risk factors is imperative. We need to widen our lens. Slide. So along with the inherent risks of doing healthcare work, there is also resilience. So I invite you now to just take a moment to pause, take a few breaths perhaps, and reflect. What does resilience mean to you? And you may want to jot down a few words or note the images that come to mind. Maybe experiences that come up. Maybe even noticing what's happening in your body as you think about the word resilience. Do you have a reaction to this word? And so just hold loosely what the word resilience means to you and what it's brought up to you as we go through the rest of this, these slides here. So I think I want to first acknowledge that those who choose to work in healthcare are already inherently resilient. We have already found ways to navigate the risks of doing helping work, at least to some extent. But I want to say it doesn't matter how resilient we are. We can be the poster person for resilience and still have an experience where it feels like the rug has been pulled out from under us because of the external conditions and maybe the magnitude of those external conditions, or perhaps the wear and tear or ongoing nature of those external conditions have overwhelmed our current ability to cope. And so, you know, that it can happen to anyone, I guess, is what I want to say. And so, having said this as well, I think we start to recognize that resilience by definition requires adversity, and that we often don't truly know how resilient we are until we come up against an adverse situation. It involves struggle. And so we can actually be both resilient and struggling at the same time. And in any given moment, when we feel challenged or we feel like we're not doing well, this doesn't mean that we aren't resilient, because resilience is actually a process that happens over time and requires perseverance. There's an ebb and flow to it. I think the other mistake that we can make is that many of us think about resilience solely on an individual level. Many on the front lines right now are feeling quite resentful to any suggestion that they simply just shore themselves up with resilience and all will be fine. This individual approach is not reflective of the whole complex picture, and it promotes a skewed and narrow definition of resilience. And I think talking about this is very much, or seeing it in this way is very much reflected in the image I have on the screen here. So here we see this lone individual, a flower in this case, overcoming all the odds to break through difficulties and prevail. Slide. I want to say, in contrast to that image that I just showed you, is that for me, resilience looks much more like this vibrant forest here, where all aspects of the ecosystem come together to do their part in fostering growth. So here we see the amount of sunlight or rain impacts the growth of the trees. The trees then impact the nourishment of the soil. The insects and the animals in this forest play their role in spreading seeds and so forth. The trees do not grow independently of the ecosystem. Slide. And I think right now, many of us are feeling like this ecosystem, quite depleted. Again, reflected by your word cloud, not particularly vibrant, maybe not even our best selves. And I think we're maybe feeling more anger than usual. We're maybe being a little bit more judgmental and blaming than usual. And this is all a function of those external conditions and that wear and tear that we have been in for so long that has activated our survival response that wasn't meant to be activated for 18 months plus. And so we're weary and we're stuck in survival mode. And so I want to say that resilience is not solely about the individual. It's about that interaction between the external conditions and resources that exist, combined with the internal conditions and resources that exist within us. It needs to be addressed in a more fulsome way, and it is a dynamic ecological process. Slide. So in taking an ecological approach to resilience, we recognize the interdependent network of relationships, systems, resources, and processes that enable the flourishing of care for ourselves, care for our patients and families, care for our colleagues, our learners, our teams, our organization, and the healthcare system itself. Well-being in one part of this care ecology is always connected to the well-being of any other part in the ecology. Slide. Therefore, resilience happens as a collective. It is not a me activity, but a we activity that needs continuous, intentional attention. It is a both-and approach. Individualistic solutions or resilience will not significantly address the magnitude of the systemic challenges we face right now. And so as we, though, attend to the me, the individual, this hopefully frees up some bandwidth or capacity within ourselves so that we can attend to the we. And in this way, together, we start to influence change so that the system functions better to support individuals, teams, professions, and so on. Slide. To sum up, resilience is dynamic and it's in continuous interaction with our environment. Resilient organizations and systems can influence or buoy the resilience of individuals and teams. Therefore, it's critical that we have a variety of strategies and interventions that target all areas of the ecology. Now is the time to really turn our attention to the environmental and systemic challenges and influence change through collective advocacy. And I want to say here, folks, not all of us have a bandwidth to do this, and that's okay, right? And so those of us who do have some bandwidth is that let's kind of pull that bandwidth together so that we can create capacity, foster resilience, and build a vibrant ecosystem. Slide. So how do we do this, you might be asking at this particular point. And so for me, I find it really helpful to remember my locus of control. So here, this image depicts the ecology in a slightly different way. And I know for me, in times of extreme adversity, when I'm feeling the most frustrated and even helpless and hopeless, I ask myself a very important question, which is, what do I have control over? Slide. So as I ask this question, I place my focus in this very small circle surrounding me. And I look at very tiny little activities that I can do that are going to help me shift a little bit. And hopefully this creates a little bit of capacity so that I can begin to remember my sphere of influence. Slide. I think we really forget our sphere of influence. And I got to say, I was at this really, really invigorating meeting yesterday where I saw this in action. There was a group of leaders who came together yesterday because they recognized the heavy burdens that the front lines are carrying, from the frontline staff to the frontline managers. And they recognized that they wanted to do something, that something had to be done. But they also recognized that they didn't have all the power to fully change the system. They did, however, recognize that they can influence change through perhaps some data collection, through perhaps painting a clearer picture and formulating a plan. And as this all started to unfold, I really started to see the energy shift within the meeting. And so, many again may be saying right now, okay, well, Diana, this is all well and good, but how do I actually find that energy? So slide here. So this third circle is important, folks. And I think a lot of us can find ourselves, I know I find myself here in all the things that are out of my control, that circle that represents all the things that are out of my control. And I can get stuck here. I can get stuck in rumination. And then this really depletes me. It depletes my energy. And so when I remember and I ask myself, what do I have control over? I remember to pull myself out of the things that I don't have control over. And in this way, then I can start to recognize the choices that I have and be able to direct more effectively direct my energies, either towards me or in my sphere of influence. And so the directors at this meeting, or the leaders at this meeting, recognize this themselves. They recognize their own locus of control and their sphere of influence, and were able to start to gather momentum to take on the larger systemic issues. So folks, I'm going to pause here now, and I hope these few slides have been helpful for you in kind of thinking about resilience in a broader way. And we want to put up a question here, so maybe the next slide. And we're going to do this a little bit differently, and we're opening up the chat here for the people that are listening on the webinar, for you to type in into the chat box, what have maybe you done or tried to do to collectively foster resilience in your workplace? This gives us a way to maybe get ideas from others, and to also just think about resilience a little bit differently. So as those come in, I want to see if I can access, and don't be shy, folks. Let's see if I can access, folks, anything coming into the chat. And so just short answer, any small ways. So being a support for colleagues when they need, hang on, this is jumping on me, sorry. So being a support for colleagues when they need one, and going to colleagues for support when needed, absolutely. Open communication and quick adaptability, right. Sending notes of appreciation to staff when I see moments of caring, support, and excellence. Wonderful. We huddle each morning as a team and ask how everyone is doing. We offer help for a coworker help a coworker out if they are feeling overwhelmed. Fully committed to staying on top of all the updates and changes that are sometimes daily. Being positive, giving accolades to colleagues, checking in on colleagues. So we can really see the we that is coming, that is starting to formulate here. Keeping strong connections with my colleagues, booked bi-weekly meetings with a colleague to debrief for supervision opportunities, acted as a champion for ongoing workplace wellness activities, being supportive, ear to those. Okay, wonderful. Taking lunch breaks together as possible. Yes, let's still try to have fun. Virtual coffee breaks for those of us who can't be together. Keep jabber chats light. Yes, okay, so wonderful there, folks. All right, Joe. So are you going to introduce our first panelist?
Yeah, sure. That's fantastic, Diana. Thank you so much for sharing that content today. And thank you for all the work that you're doing in this space. So it's been very influential on my thinking as I work with people in a healthcare worker support role. So thank you again for sharing that. I love the discussion and the chat. It's always something when I'm on the unit and people are talking about very difficult things, and you know, by the end of the sessions, you hear a bit of laughter, and people come together and they connect. And you're all here together, close to 100 people today. So we're here to foster that collective resilience. I'm going to flip it over to our panelists now, who are going to share some of their reflections on this and their personal experiences in the primary care sector. Cassie and Lindsay, you can join us now. And I don't know which one of you wants to start. I think we had thought, Cassie, you would start, but you know, we hope that we can have this kind of open conversation with the four of us. Cassie.
Hello. Yeah, Lindsay was a bit concerned about being too chatty, so I will go first. I had a little moment of embarrassment when I saw her bio. I was like, why is mine a half page and Lindsay's is only 2 sentences? She was very efficient. I was very chatty when I got that invitation for a bio. Yeah, I know you had us reflect on 3 questions, and I've made myself some really disorganized notes to kind of try and address them. So the first question was, how are you feeling going into the 4th wave, which I know you put out to everyone in the group today. And when I first saw that question, my first response was, I can't think about that question. Like thinking about that as something that is happening in this big way, I think is just too much for me to handle. So it's like, I'm not even thinking about the fact that it's a 4th wave. I'm thinking of what is on my to-do list today. Like I've never been so mindful in my life, like where I've had to be so intentional about bringing my focus back to the here and now and bringing my focus back to, you know, Diana was saying, like what's actually in my control at the moment, and like checking in with myself and noticing my jaw is really tight and like, what's going on? Like I have this thing at 5, it's only 12:30. Like go sit on your front porch and, you know, be the neighborhood watch and see people walk by on their, like, you know, the kids walk by in their lunch hour and that kind of thing. But I think that that's like for me, that's been such a big thing, is like there's just so little in my control that I really, really need to be focused on what I'm doing right now.
Thanks, Cassie. And in terms of like how that kind of played out with you in your role as a mental health counselor on the family health team, share with us a bit about that, Cassie.
How mindfulness helps me in my role as a mental health counselor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say the same kind of thing. So I'm mostly working from home. So that's my context. I have one day where I'm out in the community and I'm working at the shelter. But it is really, so I definitely have moments of overwhelm where I feel like there's nothing I can do to help this person, either because I feel so exhausted or because there are no resources available to that person that they could access quickly, or nothing accessible or timely. So I have these moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do for you. And so it's just like bringing myself back to the best of my ability and like be here with this person. Because that's the other thing that's come up for me so much, and for so many of us, is how relationships are medicine and isolation is toxic. And so if I can provide this person with connection in this moment, that's something I can offer. Right. So it's like that anchoring back to that piece.
That's so well said.
Yeah, that's such a powerful quote. Relationships are medicine, and isolation is toxic. And I think too, like for me, I think for us not to minimize or underestimate the power of our compassionate presence, because I don't think that that's doing nothing. That's what I hear you saying, right? We can't necessarily fix these larger systemic issues, but I think all of us need to feel validated, heard, held. Thank you.
And Lindsay, please jump in.
Oh, answer the question about how am I feeling in the fourth wave. Well, I have to say that the activity that you did at the beginning, I felt just this collective sort of deflation.
Yeah.
When I read, there was one positive comment on the screen. And so I think, I don't have a lot of reflections on the fourth wave. I think like Cassie, I'm just two things. I'm trying to put my head down and figure out how to maintain my own health and well-being, that of my family, my friends, so my personal sphere of influence, and also being present for my team. And I'll certainly talk a little bit about that. But I mean, the thing that I think I'm hearing from people in my work is, and people in my personal life, is people are done. That's a word I hear quite often. This has been going on for a long time and we're all tired of it. And we don't still have a sense of how things are going to unfold. So there's still a lot of uncertainty. And I think people are weary because we've all been putting ourselves wholeheartedly into work, trying to keep work going. In the community, we had to switch up the way we were doing work, where we were doing it from, how we were communicating with each other, how organizations were, like everything was turned on its head at the beginning, and we had to adapt and adjust very quickly, which we did. But we're also all still dealing with life. So we're dealing with work, we're dealing with our work, we're dealing with the pandemic writ large, and we're also living our lives. And so when I reflect back on what the team that I work on has been through in the last year collectively, I think about, births, leaves, deaths, sickness, COVID, being suddenly having to pivot because no longer do I have childcare or school. What am I going to do with my kids and work? And people have done extraordinary things personally, as well as sort of professionally, to get through this time. And I think, Diana, your presentation sort of said it all. I mean, we're often called upon to build our personal resilience, and it's not personal resilience that we need right now. It's collective resilience. Margaret Hefferman, I was watching a YouTube video, or not, a TED talk of hers, and she talked about collective restoration as a sort of concept, as how do we, as our whatever group we see as our work group, for me it's the team that I work on, how do we collectively restore ourselves in the middle of something that doesn't have an end yet, right? So that we don't all feel that we're done, that we can actually continue to have some joy and fun. And I loved it when you asked the question for people and, what are you doing for your team right now? It was everything that you put in that chat was about building our social capital. It was about building the social connectedness, keeping that connectedness going. And that's, for me, what our organizations are going to be challenged to support going forward in this, because that, for me, that's where the resilience for most of us lives in our day-to-day life, is on our team, right? With our team. Anyway, that's my response to how do I feel about the fourth wave. That was, I do talk a lot.
No, it's good.
I think it's a nice segue, though, to open up into a little bit of more of a team or collective reflection. So I don't know if Cassie or Lindsay, you want to maybe elaborate on what you have been doing on your teams.
Yeah, I think like context can be so different, like even within the family health team where Lindsay and I both work, what a team looks like can look so different. So some people, for example, who are mental health counselors might be the only mental health counselor in a sole practitioner office, whereas others might have more of a collection of folks working with each other. I really believe that teams and social connection, as I said before, is essential for supporting our work. And I think that mental health work specifically can be so isolating. So you're in a room with someone or you're on the phone with someone and it's just you and that person or you and those couple of people. And I think that the profession by nature is quite isolating. So having a focus on team and sort of like intentionally carving out time for that is important. It is really hard though when you work in a sole practitioner office where like they're run off their feet, right? As is maybe the nurse who works there and the people at the front desk, and it can be really hard to connect. So I know in our sort of prep conversation with this, that something that Lindsay said really stuck with me is that having that focus before the pandemic was really important, like having the team focus and having a foundation already going into something like this is really important so that you can build off it rather than trying to create something new in a moment of chaos. Otherwise, systemically, I was sort of like zooming out a little bit more, and the things that I think about are more of like looking to our politicians and policymakers around the kind of mental health care that's offered. So there's all of this narrative about funding for mental health care and how people's mental health matters to us, but it usually rolls out in the form of a website or an app or like a crisis line. And I just feel like that's so disconnected and it doesn't support people in the ways that they need to be supported. And my feeling is that we really need to be focusing on more equitable mental health care, given that in the mental health system, or sorry, in the health system, mental health care seems to be one of those two-tier systems where if you have money and resources, you can actually access mental health care quite quickly and you can access good care and you get to pick who you see or where you go. Whereas if you don't have access to resources, you are kind of stuck with what's given to you, what's publicly funded. And I think a lot of what's publicly funded is kind of inadequate.
Thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's interesting because going into the next year or 2 years or even maybe longer, I think we're going to continue to see the fallout from a mental health perspective of all of this. We're already seeing increased referrals and wait times and burden on the system trying to serve people. I worry in particular about our young people and the price that they've paid in all of this, and may continue to pay. Let me just, if I could just go back to sort of the team concept, because I do think there's some lessons, maybe are some things to think about in terms of organizations as well. But we did have a pretty strong team, I think, going into the pandemic. The team that I work on is an interdisciplinary team. We do live together in the same office, although we haven't for 1.5 years now, almost 2. And we had a pretty strong team going in. We had regular team meetings, we had team lunches, we had an biannual couple of events that we did with our broader team, with all the docs that we serve. So we had I think a pretty good base going in, and boy, were we challenged in the first while in particular to just try to figure out, without any rules or really much guidance from above or anywhere really, how to sort of figure out how to do the work. But the one thing we have tried to do as a team and continue to try to do as a team throughout the pandemic was to stay connected, even though we are all often working from our own homes and not physically, not seeing each other in 3 dimensions. We've built in regular team meetings. I mean, we meet every 2 weeks. We have done a bit of team building. We've done some sort of fun stuff. We had a cooking challenge early on. We put a cookbook together, COVID cuisine, and just tried to continue the connectedness that we had before. I don't know how much of it made a difference or what parts of it made a difference. And I think that's one of the things that we really should pay attention to coming out of all of this, is to sit down with our teams and figure out collectively what worked, what do we want to take away from this and do differently than we were doing before, what do we want to stop doing that we did before that we found out we didn't need to do, because I think there's a lot of that too. And how do we keep some of the team autonomy and creativity going, because we were kind of left to our own devices early on to try and figure things out, and we did that. And I think sort of how do you continue to build that social capital on teams? And I think that's a challenge for us on our teams in general, but it's also a challenge, I think, for our organizations to figure out how to support that in a very purposeful sort of way, which I don't think in healthcare we're actually all that good at.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say I agree, Lindsay. Like I think we have not done a good job of making space for those kind of activities, and they are so crucial, right? Because as all of you have already said, when I go around and ask people what's getting you through, it's always the strength of my team. Yet it amazes me how little like white space we get in our schedules to actively support our team connectivity and so on.
Yeah, I was again just thinking about a quote from somebody else, but what happens between people really counts in terms of getting the work done, and that high degree of sort of social sensitivity to one another, knowing each other well, knowing what our strengths and what our challenges are, being able to be honest and open, and then be able to deal with the tough stuff when it comes up. Because if you don't have that grounding first, you're not able to pull together in a time when things are again turned on their head as they were for us, right?
Well, yeah, and what you're saying there essentially is creating a collective sense of safety. Like that's foundational. And then, right, we can when we have that safety and trust, we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable and go to our colleagues with our vulnerabilities. And I think the other piece of this is that's then our opportunity to debrief, right? Because of all those risks that I showed in the Venn diagram, like what do we do with all that stuff? And if we're go, busy all the time, that stuff just gets stored. And so, we need that space and opportunity to, in a safe manner, bring those stories of suffering and loss and all those things up and out.
And to have some fun. Honestly,
exactly.
I mean, that's the piece that, to allow us to let loose a little bit. And that was in the chat a lot, I think, as well.
Yes.
Both focusing on, we just need to have a little bit of fun here, lighten up, for even if it's for a few minutes, right? To be able to laugh and think about something other than the sort of what feels like the dire circumstances that we've been living for so long.
That's so important. So I want to wrap up this section. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Lindsay. Just in hearing what you were saying, just so much of that linked to the content that Diana was presenting, talking about your reactions, your reflections in the context of an ecology. And I think both you, Cassie, and you, Lindsay, talked a lot about that from not just the individual perspective, but from your team perspective, your organization, and also the system at large. So thank you so much for your reflections today. And I just, Lindsay, you said something about concern for young people, and people that know me also know that I've been concerned for our young people who are healthcare workers, who are working also on the front lines. And so I really hope that there's some of you folks here today to hear some of this and to take really important messages away from this around the importance of connection and supports within your teams. I think we'll go on to the next portion. Thanks again, Cassie and Lindsay. We have another engagement exercise to kind of end today on. We're going to go to the Slido again. So please go to slido.com and enter the code 740583. And again, the theme is kind of, we're wrapping up today. You've heard from all of us today. What is one thing you will do differently or will take away after listening to today's event? So I'll give people a chance to enter some responses. Yeah, so many responses coming in. Thank you everyone for joining this question. Amazing. Self-care really popping out for sure. Staying connected, advocating for change, ecological approach, staying connected, being mindful, asking for help. So important.
The socialize and important to laugh and be light. I think that's so good too. That's all our nervous system stuff, right? When we're carrying all this stress and tension, laughter is a great way to get a reset in the body.
Yeah, for sure. That aspect of growth too. I heard that in Cassie and Lindsay in your responses. Hey, like you had opportunities to kind of do things differently, and this adversity kind of propelled you kind of in that direction. Excellent.
I think it's really interesting because then again, one marker of a high performing team is that people feel able to give and ask for help, and feel safe to do. You mentioned safety, Diana. Safe to do it, and I think all of this is a great way to end because it's so different than the other question, right?
Yeah. The other thing that's leaping out on the page for me, quite frankly, is say no when overloaded.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling more and more these days around maybe even a collective no. And how do we find the courage, or how do we get the support around to say, when we have to say that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think these are really good notes to end on. I thank you for your participation, and
Joe, there's one last slide.
Yeah, right, around resources, and I want to. Sorry about that.
No, okay, go ahead. Go with resources, and then there's still a last slide. So go ahead. Sorry.
Right. No problem, Diana. Just ending on a good note. When we have sessions like this, we tend to observe these shifts. From the beginning when we express kind of how we're feeling in the moments. And I really hope that sessions like this, coming together like this, helps you end on this note where you can recharge a bit, that it gives you a bit of energy, a bit more fuel to your tank so that you can go on your day. Please, if you feel like you need additional support, please reach out. We have excellent resources available through the Mental Health Services for Health and Community Care Workers portal. That's at stjoes.ca/HCW mental health support. This will get you quick access to mental health specialists who will talk to you on the phone. There is an excellent resource at the HHS, at Hamilton Health Sciences, that Diana and her team, thank you for pulling that together. Really, really rich resources for resilience. We have crisis-based supports in our city at Coast Hamilton, and also the website Wellness Together Canada. So please utilize resources if you feel like you need to. Diana, back to you to end it off. Oh, our partners and sponsors, thank you so much again.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Next slide. So I just want to leave on with this image as a way to kind of circle back to the analogy of our forest ecology. So this particular forest here is a redwood forest, and I don't know if folks have had the pleasure of standing next to a redwood tree or being in a redwood forest, and I know I certainly am in awe in the presence of these huge trees that just are so big and so strong and so tall. And I was really surprised when I learned that redwoods actually have a very shallow root system. And the way they stay strong and tall is that they intertwine their roots together. So it really is a representation for me about how resilience is not about any individual tree, and that it best happens as a we working together at all levels of the ecosystem. And we started our webinar with the Naomi Remen quote, and I want to end with Margaret Mead. So never believe that a few caring people can't change the world, for indeed, that's all who ever have. So thank you so much, folks, for spending this hour with us. Really loved having all of your comments and your input. Thank you, Lindsay and Cassie, for your sharing your wise experiences. And thank you, Joe, for hosting this along with me.
All right, everyone, take care.
Bye-bye. We wish you all well.